everyone. Now it's the afternoon, so good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing good. Thank you for coming on, a Monday morning. It's crazy. So before I introduce myself, I really wanted to make sure that we knew what's going on. So please, during the session and while Carolina's talking, just mute yourself. Of course, have your camera on. I'd love to see your faces, but the one mic rule, we're all familiar with that. And then if you do have a question or you do want something to say, during the Q&A session afterwards, feel free to raise your hand, have some questions in the chat going, I'd love to see it. I'd love to interact with everyone. And then, so I'm Christy. I'll be a rising sophomore right here in Brooklyn College. I'm also Latina. I'm Colombian Ecuadorian, but I look very white. So that's always something I've struggled with. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to hear the speaker. I really do feel like this is going to be a very important meeting today. And I'll hand it over to Andrea.
Hello, everyone. This is Andrea. I'm here today with Christy. I'm a senior at Brooklyn College, and I'm studying early childhood education. And I'm here today to introduce you to our speaker, Carolina Bank Muñoz. She actually is a professor here at Brooklyn College in the sociology department, and she's also a professor at the Graduate Center. And her work focuses on immigration, labor work, and Latin America. She has also been working with Jesus Perez in the ISSO department. So, Carolina, I'll give it to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's really great to see familiar faces and meet new people. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you for the kind and generous introduction. So I'll do a little bit of a personal narrative, and then I hear there will be some questions. So I'll start with a little bit of my background. I'm originally from Santiago, Chile. My family and I migrated from Chile in 1978 during the dictatorship, and we moved to LA. And we moved to LA because my uncle, my dad's brother, was already living in LA. And so my family history is, both of my parents were socialists, activists in their own right. My mom was a secretary for an agency under Salvador Allende, who was the democratically elected socialist president of Chile in 1973. And my dad was a taxi driver and an organizer of a taxi union in Chile. But often, I think like Christy, it's hard to tell, right? Like, they're like, you're Latina, although, I guess growing up, it was my experience in I grew up, in Southern California and then moved to New York. And that transition was always very funny to me because in Southern California, I very much got the like, well, you don't look Latina situation because I grew up in a predominantly Mexican neighborhood. But in New York, people looked at me and they were like, oh, you're Puerto Rican. And I was always like, well, actually, I'm not Puerto Rican, but at least you know how to identify me. You can put me in a particular box in ways that it was harder in LA. But I think the other part of my story is that my last name is Bank Muñoz, which is also very confusing to people because people are like, oh, is that your husband's last name, or where did the bank come from, right? And the bank comes from another diasporic story, which is that my father's mother, my grandmother, left Germany in 1939, escaping the Holocaust, and went to Chile, right? So that's where the bank comes from. So anyway, I grew up in LA with two kind of political parents who never let a conversation go at the dinner table about politics, right? I grew up with a lot of politics, a lot of conversations about politics. And when I was a teenager, I rejected those politics. I wanted to be like a regular American kid, and I didn't want to like talk about left politics or socialism. And and it took until I got to college again to really kind of spark my interest in social justice and activism. And that's when I kind of did the traditional immigrant thing, right? I majored in biology. I was going to go to medical school, and because that's what immigrant kids do, right? You either major in business or you major in medicine or you go be a lawyer. Like those are the only career options, right? That's what our parents know. And but I tanked chemistry. Chemistry did me in. I failed chemistry once, I failed chemistry twice. And then I said, okay, maybe biology is not the right major for me. And I took, then I was trying to figure out like, what could I do? Like, I don't know. I don't like, what could I do that's still like helping people, but not medical school? And I thought maybe I would go into speech pathology and audiology. And so I majored in linguistics. I took a linguistics class and I really liked linguistics. And I started taking linguistics classes. And as part of the linguistics program, I had to take sociology. And I took my first sociology class and I just fell in love, right? It was like, sociology. All the light bulbs went off. I don't know if any of you have had that experience in college yet, but like being in a class when literally everything that's being said resonates and you're just like thinking all these things and things started making sense to me. And I started feeling like getting more in touch with my roots and getting more in touch with who I was as a person. And so I really got kind of passionate about sociology. And I decided once I decided to go ahead and double major. And so when I graduated, I had double majored in sociology and linguistics. But after, as I was graduating, I was still kind of planning this speech pathology route because I didn't know like what else to do. And I've always been very responsible for my parents. Like my parents never had a lot of money. My dad's a driving instructor and my mom really struggled. She before she died, she had a lot of health issues. She had lupus. And so I was always in charge of kind of making sure that the rent was paid and bills were paid. And, there was a lot of responsibility on me. So I knew I needed a good paying job, right? Like that was something that was important. And then one of my college professors told me, she was like, what do you, come to my office hours. Let's talk about your future, right? My very last semester of college. And she said, what are you planning to do with your life? And I said, well, I got into this master's program. I'm going to go into speech pathology and audiology, and that's what I'm going to do. And she said, that sounds boring. That sounds terrible. Don't do that. And I was like, what are you talking? Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I going to go do? And she was like, listen, you need to go work for the union. You need to become a union organizer. And she was doing a project on garment workers in California at the time. And she said, I can get you a job at the union. So I was like, I don't know about this union business. Like, I don't really know anything about unions, but that sounds good. Like, that sounds interesting. Like, okay. She was like, actually, you could I could get you a job at 2 unions. You could either work with garment workers in LA, or you can move to Watsonville in the Central Valley of California and work on the strawberry organizing campaign. It was these strawberry pickers that were being organized by the United Farm Workers. And I interviewed for both jobs, and I got both of them. And then I had to decide, do I take the job for $12,000 a year, being an organizer for the United Farm Workers in Watsonville, and live in like a labor camp with workers, right? Or do I take the job for $20,000 a year in LA working with garment workers? And I decided that I should stay in LA and take the higher paid job, which I'm sure to all of you sounds like peanuts. But let me tell you, in 1997, $20,000 was not bad. So I went and I took the job with Unite, which was the union that represented garment workers. And it was, I learned so much in that first job. First I learned a whole lot about unions and what unions do, and the importance of unions in like creating power for people to reject and fight back against oppressive working conditions, which were particularly bad in the garment industry in LA. And I also learned that capital is very powerful, right? In that year that I worked for Unite, I worked on this Guess Jeans campaign, and there were 500 workers who were organizing in a warehouse, and Guess Jeans announced that they were going to leave the country and go to Colombia, actually. And Colombia and Georgia, and 500 workers lost their jobs. And it was really awful and traumatic. And I was really, I felt really responsible, for that loss and for those workers. And right, do people still wear what? Yes, yeah, exactly. I think people do. So I went to grad school, right? I decided, so my professor was like, okay, so great experience. You got a good year under your belt. Now come and get a PhD in sociology. So that's, again, because I didn't really know what a PhD was, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, she hasn't led me astray so far, so I'm just going to do what she tells me to do. So I went and enrolled in this PhD program in sociology, and kept working with a union like part-time for part of my grad school career. And when I finished my PhD, well, while I was doing my PhD, I organized a union for teaching assistants at the University of California, and we bargained our first contract, and we went on strike in 2000 or 1999. And then I was on the bargaining committee. And then I went and worked at the UCLA Labor Center for 3 years, where I was a project director, and my job was to do popular education with workers and kind of bring together the resources of the academy with unions and with immigrant worker centers, and create partnerships between unions and worker centers in LA. And I ran like a summer internship program and did things like that. And then I was as part of that, I was the education coordinator for the immigrant worker freedom rides that happened in 2003, where immigrant workers got on buses, and we were going to do this pilgrimage based on kind of the African-American civil rights movement of freedom rides. And we did this kind of bus pilgrimage to Washington, DC to fight for immigration reform. and we got caught, and we got put in a detention center. And, you know, there's lots of stories about those rides and the experience of those rides. But my job on the buses was to create the curriculum and do the education that created solidarity between African-American workers and Latino and Asian workers, and kind of producing a narrative and a history of seeing the struggle as linked, right? As not that the immigrant rights movement was surpassing or stepping on or reducing the experience of African Americans, but that there were commonalities that we could, you know, highlight and bring together. So I did that, and then I left the Labor Center and came to Brooklyn College, where I've been ever since. And over the course of my time at Brooklyn College, I have been the chair of the department. I've, with Jesus and Anna, I've been involved in ISSO. I've been on the executive committee of the union, and now I'm the union chapter chair. And this summer, actually, the reason I have to leave at 1 is because I am running a summer program for community organizers. So that's what I have been doing, and yeah, that's me. Hi.
Thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much about you through the speaking in comparison to like my hours of research. Like it's completely different just hearing it directly from you. So thank you so much. So me and Andrea do have some questions ready, but we are going to open it up for you guys. So if you are willing, please raise your hand if you have any questions, or if you don't want to speak, completely fine. Just type it in the chat and then Andrea can read it out for you. So you did answer a lot of my questions already, but I just was very curious, how do you balance being, you know, such a prominent activist while also being like a full-time professor at college? Because you literally have to leave at 1, so it's very clear your schedule is very full. How does it feel to balance that, you know?
I like to say that I have a chronic illness. It's called chronic overparticipation. Right? Yeah. That is who I am as a person, and that comes with strengths and challenges. So I like being busy. Like, I'm a person who likes being busy, and I have to force myself to like slow down, and I try very hard. I'm usually pretty unsuccessful. But I don't know, maybe it just works with how my brain works. Like, different things give me different motivation, right? Being in the classroom gives me a certain kind of energy and excitement and motivation, and being an activist feeds a different part of my soul, you know, feeds a different part of who I am. And so I think that I get different things from the different things that I do. And that's part of what makes the balancing less tedious, I guess, or difficult.
Great, thank you. So I did notice that Brian Yu does have his hand raised, so feel free to ask your question now.
Right, and can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. I heard in your speech that you said that you work in, that you attended to unions movement, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is that, do you find any difference between the union on, for example, 2000s and 1990s, between 1990s to 2021? Do you find any significant difference in the union?
So I've been fortunate to get to work for different unions and be a part of different unions. So I think it's hard to say, like, I can't tell you like in the same union how things have changed, but I think the labor movement has changed as a whole, right? I think that unions in the United States have kind of a bad rap, right? They, like, when we think of unions, there's these like stereotypes of like what unions are and what they do, and you know, the mafia and the corruption and this and that, and there's certainly that. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there are unions that are democratic organizations and unions that are less democratic organizations, right? Like kind of like everything in our society, there are community organizations that are more democratic and less democratic. There are student groups that are more democratic and less democratic, right? So, but I do think I've seen like the labor movement shifting, particularly around issues of race, like really grappling with like tensions in the membership around racism, around sexism. Like there have been these movements like internally that have been focusing on those things and shifting those things. So I do see, and I think the labor movement is also like working on being more invested in organizing, right? Rather than servicing. Like we tend to think of like unions as things that you pay dues to and then you get stuff from. And the kind of union that I'm trying to build and that I want to be a part of is a union that is driven by members, right? There is no union outside of members of the union, right? We are the union. We control the decisions of the union. We make things happen. It's not a service organization. It's something that we have to make happen and advance, right? And it's hard to go from thinking like that you're supposed to get services to feeling like you're a part of something bigger.
So I do have a follow-up question with what you guys were just talking about. Because this is such a political movement, how do you stay so hopeful with, you know, our country changing and evolving politically, right? Our previous president was something, you know, and now we have Biden, and, you know, how do you stay hopeful with something so crazy, so chaotic, right?
That's a great question. I'll say I have my periods of hopefulness and my periods of despair. I won't lie about that. I mean, I think that's real, you know. I had 4 years of despair with Trump. It was really hard to see anything good, you know, coming out of that. But I guess I just have this like faith in people, you know, in people power and in the power of collective action and in the power that comes from people getting together and fighting around issues. And I think, I mean, I think I've been fortunate to see it happen, like to win, right? To even small things, like, but to see change happen and to be able to like get together and fight for something and then have it happen, right? Then that gives you like momentum and to keep things going. And like a great example is the Immigrant Student Office, right? That Jesus has been fighting for, that fought for forever. And I joined him, you know, midway through that struggle, and we won. Like we actually made it happen, right? Like it exists. It is something that exists today because a couple of people were passionate about it, and then more people got passionate about it. And then we had a committee of passionate people who worked together and put together proposals and created different pieces of it. And then we pushed and we pushed and we did these trainings and we did, you know, and then it happened, right? So I think if you're fortunate enough to experience like those small wins over time, then that gives you faith that collective action does work, even when you're losing, like we've lost so much, like we still don't have immigration reform, right? And I've been on that bandwagon for a hot minute. And we still don't, have the working conditions that we all want to have on campus and the resources that we want for CUNY, right? But I guess just like experience and knowing that like small change is also important is what keeps me kind of positive.
So I'm just wondering, as a Latina, I know that like we always have like hardships and we struggle with even just having people listen to us. How do you work around it? Like, what are some hardships that you have faced as a Latina? Do you feel like it has hindered what you've done, or has it made you better? Is there more of an ambition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I will say my experience is really, because I get racialized as white, right? My experience of being a Latina is really different. And that doesn't mean I haven't had bad experiences, but it just means that I acknowledge like the privilege that I have being a white Latina, which is a really different experience from other Latinos, right? And that being said, I'll share with you a couple of stories. When I was growing up, we were undocumented for like 5 years until my uncle was able to request us. And then we had our green cards, right? And so when I was in junior high school, I went to junior high school in Burbank, which is a place where Lockheed Martin has a big base. And I wasn't allowed to go on the field trip to Lockheed Martin because I was deemed a national security threat because I wasn't a US citizen, right? Like I was 11. So yes, the aerospace company. Yeah. So for example, that's like an example that really shaped me when I was a kid, because I was like, it made me realize the spaces that I belong and the spaces that I don't, right? When I got to Brooklyn College and I was going up for tenure, we have in departments, we have these things called appointments committees that or department personnel and budget committees, right, that make decisions, first line decisions about tenure and promotion. One of the senior members of the appointments committee, wearing her Obama button and everything, said that the theme song to my tenure case should be La Cucaracha, right? And the same person, when I got hired for the job, said that I should move to Sunset Park because that's where the Mexicans live, right? So even being a very white Latina, right? Certainly people have said stupid shit to me. Educated people say stupid things, right? And it makes very clear to me how racism works and how structural inequality operates, and how that is racialized and gendered, right? Even on our own campus. So, my instinct with all of that, to Andrea's question, is like, I'm a fighter. I'm like, oh yeah, you want me to prove to you that I can do this? I'll publish 2 books, not just one, So that's kind of my MO. And I think the best advice actually I got in grad school was to say, if you want to be an activist academic, you have to do twice the amount of work that everybody else does. Because if you want to be taken seriously and not just be dismissed as an activist, then you have to prove yourself even harder. And I took that message to heart, and I try to do that, but it's messed up and exhausting. And like, why are my colleagues telling me that La Cucaracha should be, you know, the theme song? I mean, fortunately, this person is now retired, but these are things that faculty of color, that staff of color have to deal with daily, right? Daily issues like this. You know, other people in my department have experienced, Black women in my department have experienced being told that they should make coffee or bring coffee to white faculty members, for example. And this is a sociology department. We're not talking about electrical engineering here, you know? These are supposedly woke people. Yeah.
You know, it's crazy because I'm first generation, right? My parents immigrated from their respective countries in Latin America. So similar to you, I've kind of been one of the first in my family to really do something with my academic career. And that is, for me, exhausting. And I wanted to know if you had any advice for someone like me and maybe someone who was similar to us, you know, here in the meeting.
I hate to break it to you, but my dad still doesn't know what I do. He'll call me up and I won't respond. And then he'll say, why didn't you answer the phone? And I was like, Papi, because I'm working. And he was like, but I didn't call you on a Tuesday. And I was like, I don't just work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He was like, but that's when you teach. I don't just work on when I teach. Right? And he was like, I don't understand. So I think it's really hard. I mean, I think that's and he's like very supportive, you know, like he's very excited that I went to college and that I have a PhD, and he brags to everybody about it, but that doesn't mean he knows like what I do. Like he doesn't, you know, like he knows that I do these things and that I write these things and that my name is on books, but like that doesn't, there's still a disconnect between what it is that I do and what he thinks, you know, I do. So it's hard. It's like, it's constant education. Like you're constantly educating people about what we do, because it's not, you know, people know what doctors do. People know what lawyers do, right? It's harder to know what professors do, right? So there's a lot of education.
Got it. Thank you so much. I did notice that Tolita has her hand raised, so, you know, please feel free to ask your question.
Hi. So you mentioned that you are also working as a community organizer, and I was wondering if you had any tips for, you know, beginning community organizers, or at least, you know, anyone who's looking to do some sort of cultural organization. What type of tips, or what do you think that they should, you know, keep in mind once they're first starting, particularly if there's someone who is looking to create links between different movements?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that for me, everything is about organizing, right? And so whether it's the labor movement, whether it's student groups, whether it's community organizations, like I think the first step is to learn how to be a good organizer and learn how to think strategically. And I think the number one key thing to learn how to be a good organizer is to know how to listen, right? We like to, there's like a saying that's something like 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? So listen more than you speak. Even though that's not what's happening right now. I'm talking a lot. But I think, yeah, I assigned this book for this program that I'm running this summer called like How to Be a Successful Organizer. So thinking through like who you're involved with, listening to issues, finding commonalities across groups, learning how to identify issues and targets. Who are the change makers? How are you going to move a particular agenda? What are the steps? What's the ultimate goal? And then being able to take that ultimate goal and kind of reverse engineer what you need to do to begin to win, right? But organizing is all about building relationships, right? Building relationships, finding issues that unify people and that people want to work on. And we have this like really damaging, I think, rhetoric of apathy in our society, like, oh, nothing can change, or nobody wants to do any work, or nobody wants to, you know, invest in anything. But if you listen, you're always you're gonna find the issues. You know what I mean? Like, sure, it may, on the whole, it may appear that we live in a really apathetic world, but if you sit there and talk to someone, you know, and you're like, hey, what's going on? What do you do for your job? What are the issues, right, that are of concern to you? It's very rare that you're gonna get like nothing, right? That people are gonna be like, I don't have anything to say. Everybody has an issue that they're passionate about, or that they care about, or that they're dealing with. And building the relationships is about finding those issues, right? What are those like core issues that if that person's having that issue, then maybe other people are having that issue. And if other people are having that issue, how can we unite to work on that issue? And once we unite around an issue, who can change it, right? Is it the corporation? Is it the legislator? Is it the chair of the department? Is it the president of Brooklyn College? Is it, you know, who's your target, right? So thinking, like, learning to really think strategically like that, I think is really key.
Thank you.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like, finding the issue that you're passionate about, just working towards, is very important, because that's what's gonna really help you find the end goal. So I'm just wondering, when you were working with Jesus Perez with the ISSO department, how did you both go about it? Just to advocate for a program like the ISSO office.
Because Jesus is a genius. Relationship builder extraordinaire, right? He is, I mean, he's been working on this, like, you should, you know, you should say what you did, Jesus.
It's not true. It's really, you know, about, you know, what Professor Bank Muñoz is saying, you know, building a community and having the community speak out. You know, I think that, you know, Carolina, you know, we had been speaking out for years about needing an office to service immigrants at Brooklyn College. But when Carolina got involved, she really made it into a plan. I mean, when she talks about strategy, she really talks about finding what needs to be done and who can get it done. So when Carolina went to the president and she was told, well, you know, you have to put up a plan together and, you know, white paper, most people get turned off by that. But she, on the other hand, said, let's do it. And she assigned things, she started writing. And when people give an assignment, especially to faculty or other, you know, people in the administration, they just forget or they let it go. And that's one way for the administration to diffuse action, by assigning something. But Carolina said, no, I'm going to do it. So she wrote the white paper. She got people involved. She identified what needed to be done, and it happened. You know, and I really like to see, you know, I like to consider myself just, you know, a partner with Carolina in terms of being there for her to construct this whole notion of how to make things come about. So if there's one thing that I really want to just second and, you know, and celebrate and acknowledge from Carolina, is her real, you know, power in getting things done. She sees things need to happen, and whether it's in the classroom, or whether it's with ISSO, or whether it is with the community at large at Brooklyn College, right? Social justice issues. She says, okay, that is happening. That is not right. How can we fix it? So then everybody joins in. But the hardest part is really identifying the issue at hand and developing a strategy to get it fixed. So I would have to say for ISSO to happen, we probably had hundreds of people that wanted to make it happen, but without Carolina's action, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, and without Jesus's action, and without, you know, a few other people, I don't know, like 20. So I just saw in the chat this question about essential workers, right, that Karina posted. And I think that's such a critical question. I mean, this isn't a great example of how narratives can change, right? Like, nobody cared about Amazon warehouse workers until people couldn't get toilet paper. You know what I mean? Like, or nurses, or hospital workers, or grocery workers. And I think we've seen a critical shift, right, in the last year and a half, this idea of essential workers, and bringing to light the inequality in that, right? The inequality of people who are essential and yet teachers, right? And yet aren't getting paid living wages, just wages, fair wages for the work that they're doing. And that's not going to go away, right? So eventually the pandemic relief money is going to go away, and what's going to happen? Like, are folks going to, you know, keep working under hazardous working conditions, you know, with low pay, right? How do we change that? So I think there are, you know, lots of ways to change it, including supporting legislation. There's something called the PRO Act right now that fundamentally changes labor law in the United States, and labor law in the United States is really stacked against workers. It didn't used to be. In the 1930s, we had really great labor law, but it's been eroded. I think unions are really important forces for protecting workers and workers' rights. And it's really challenging to unionize. The US is a really challenging place to organize, right? Because companies like Amazon and Walmart have so much power to organize against workers, right? So I think that getting involved in legislative action, or getting involved in worker centers like Make the Road, or like community organizations like the Red Hook Initiative, or unions that are taking on some of these issues, is a great way to support and advocate for workers.
So Anna Bartolome has asked, what's a quote that you would share to everybody to keep people motivated to to advocate for what they want?
That's a great question. I'm like terrible at quotes. I don't really, I mean, the 2 ears, 1 mouth thing is probably the, you know, closest. Like, I'm not, yeah, I don't have like an inspirational quote in my back pocket, but now I feel like I have to go get one.
It doesn't have to be a quote. It can just be like, how do you convince and motivate the students that are in your classes to become activists like you are?
Yeah.
What is one thing you say?
Yeah. I mean, I try to instill in them the power of the collective, you know, that as individuals, we're all kind of isolated and weak, right? And it's only when we act in a unified way that we can achieve change. And we need more of that, right? Like we need, and it's hard. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And when you lose, it can be demoralizing. But solidarity is so powerful, right? And important. And I think that that's what I try to kind of get across. We live in this very individualistic society. All of the messages that we get are individualistic messages about, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and that's just not how the world works. You know, when I think about my own history, there's no bootstraps. You know, the only reason I was able to do what I've been able to do is because, one, my parents instilled in me like the value of critical thinking. Two, I had great advisors in college that picked me up and told me what to do with my life, you know. So kind of at every step in the way, I've had mentors help me. I've had writing groups help me with writing books. I've had, you know, other union activists and other people on campus working together towards the goals that we've had. And so really trying to like defeat that idea that you as an individual either can like change your own life or are responsible for changing your own life, I think is so damaging, because it's a village. It's the, you know, it's the village that to make anything happen, including social change, you know.
So earlier you were speaking about having a mentor and having people to help guide you. For people who don't have any mentors yet, and for other minorities who don't have access to have people like this, is there something that your mentor have told you that sticks with you and maybe you want to share with everyone?
I think everybody should get a mentor, and you should go to the ISSO session where we talk about how do you get a mentor, which we'll start doing again in the fall. But I mean, I think that I was really fortunate to have this mentor who was able to kind of identify that I was a working class immigrant student, first generation college student, and I didn't have the same kind of map of like how universities work, you know. And she met with me every week, right? And I would come in with questions, and she did that when I was an undergrad, and she did that when I was a grad student. And she knew that I needed more kind of resources and help than other people who had parents who were professors, right? Like if I think about my own kid, like the language that he has, the access to, like he know, like he's 13 and he's already like, oh, I'm researching, you know, the best schools in marine biology, and he has the tools to do that because I'm a professor, you know. I didn't have those tools, right? And so I'm very conscious of that. And I think just like it's really important for people to have your back, right? So and to know or be able to hear about your experiences and what you need to succeed. And so even though it's like weird and uncomfortable and sometimes odd to go up to faculty members or staff to ask for help, like it's really, it's super important to, like, that's one of those things that first generation working class college students don't do. Like you shut up and you do what you're told. You don't like go seek mentors. Like that's so not that, right?
Yeah.
So like breaking from those molds too, and like stepping outside of comfort zones, I think is really important.
Okay. So we do have a little over 5 minutes left, and I do know you have to leave at 1. So I did want to ask if you had any contact information you wanted to share, or any other information about the programs you're a part of, just so everyone can have access to it and reach out to you later. And also, thank you so, so much. This was an amazing speech. This was the first time me and Andrea hosted something and had a talk like this, and I really did love it. I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm sure all of the participants enjoyed it too, because the chat was bombing. It was amazing. Everyone was talking, they loved it. So I can't thank you enough, but thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I mean, I love, this is like, I love having these conversations. And I think, yeah, I mean, I'll just make a small pitch for the sociology department, which is like the best department on campus. Sorry, Leticia.
I think that we should unmute
I'm
ourselves.
pretty biased towards Andrew, but yeah.
Really unmute themselves and give them a big hand, and it is a wonderful job. And just you can unmute yourself so that they can hear, and if it's possible, and because it is really incredible work.
Well
and
done.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I know that we have to have a few minutes. So first of all, I cannot be more proud of Christy and Andrea. They were so lovers, and we spent so much time over the weekend to prepare for this. So I want to really sort of like once again give them a big hand, and thank you for everyone show up. Like a couple logistics, and I want to respect Carolina's time. Yeah, they shine. They just. They shine, and so I want to make sure that we have some data in terms of assessment. One of the reasons why we continue to do what we're doing, because people tell us that we are doing a good job, and then we show people who make decisions about a college that we do good job. So this kind of post is extremely important. So it's just only one question, so you can say it. One, how do you rate this session? 1 means really bad. 5 is awesome. You guys are college students. Okay, make sure you got the numbers right. 1 is bad, 5 is awesome. And Carolina may have some other information share, so I want to make sure that you guys have access to it. Carolina, you can send it to us, and I will post it on the Slack. And if you guys had not joined our Slack, you got to do that, because our Slack also bombs, and that is a very, very great tools for everyone. So I'm going to give so like a last few minutes for Carolina to make a closing comment, and then for our squad member, for the Women's Center squad member, can you guys hang around for 5 minutes after Carolina sign off? Okay, because we want to talk a little bit about logistics. Like the floor is all yours, Carolina, and 2 minutes until you can sign off.
I mean, I would just say, like, what an amazing, you all are such an amazing group, and what an amazing experience this summer. And I think that we need everybody, right? Like it's yes, Trump is gone, and like the worst of it is behind us, but there is so much work to be done on our campus, off our campus. And we need, I hope that you're inspired to kind of get involved and get active if you're not already active, and build organizations and push, to make change. Yeah. And enjoy your time in the program.
Thank you so much, Carolina. And you're always welcome to come back. Whenever you feel like talking to us, just let us know. We will make time for you. Right? Don't you guys agree? Yes. Thank you so much, Carolina.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carolina, for your time.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great week.